10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hi, guys. It's Lori with the Capital Film Arts Alliance and our bi-monthly kind of webcast, the CFAA Film Talk. We just really want to keep everybody connected. We know that this is an industry, filmmaking and writing and acting are creative industries that are driven by the ability to connect in person. They're driven by networking, and unfortunately, we're all limited with the networking that we cannot do right now. So this is why we developed this program, and we hope that you're digging it. We have a lot of fun in talking to these people, and all of the different episodes that we have we've had can be found on our website and also on our YouTube channel. So if you're interested in seeing any of the previous speakers or hearing what they have to say, please check that out. And we love to let them know that their pages are being looked at. So what is happening tonight, we've got a great conversation we're going to be having with the formidable actor and director, filmmaker, Perry King. Perry King has had an incredible run at several different careers already within Hollywood, and is also a resident of Cool, which is up in the Sonora, Nevada foothills. So he's got his roots tied to this area, which has a lot to do with the movie that he just made, and we're going to talk a lot about that, which is The Divide. Some of you may have seen it, I hope. If not, I can highly recommend. This is a movie that you're going to want to see and you're going to want to share. So we're going to talk to Perry because he's got a lifetime full of information about filmmaking, about acting. Every time I talk to him, I learn something more. Financial planning for creatives is something else he's really great at. Who knew? The really fun thing is that his very good friend and mine that will be guest interviewing and throwing some questions at him as well is Beverly Lewis. Beverly is one of the first people I even met in Sacramento while on a film shoot, a verifiable film shoot. And she's the Placer County Lake Tahoe Film Commissioner. And I have found her to be the most incredible resource, the most wonderful person, and so incredibly helpful to filmmakers at every level, at every turn. So what news we just broke in our newsletter, and you guys are going to hear more about it tonight for the very first time, is that Beverly is retiring. I know, I'm so happy for her. I'm so jealous, but I'm so happy for her. But I'm so sad for us. And she has laid groundwork that I think is going to help all of us to continue to build something really important here in Sacramento. So I can't even say thank you enough to her. I so wish that we could be involved in creating a big celebration, but I guarantee you to come as soon as we can have something public. We'll plan that party because she deserves that kind of recognition for sure. So let's see. The newsletter, if you're not already getting it, go onto our website, which is capitalfilmarts.org. Just click on that and you can subscribe to the newsletter for free and get all the information that we send out. We just booked our speaker for next Tuesday, the 17th, which is going to be some very interesting folks from the Adobe creative team. Eric Aspera, Ian Webb, Mike Burton, and I think Eric Maddox. Anyway, these are all incredibly talented guys who are at the heart of a lot of the interesting marketing and ideas that Adobe is putting out to promote their products. So they're going to be here to talk about that. So I digress. Wanted to get these guys online. Thank you so much for joining us. Be sure to pop in and say hi on the comments or leave a question. We'll try and get to the questions, or we'll definitely have a Q&A session, afterwards. But anyway, thank you so much. And I want to introduce Perry. Perry King, and Beverly Lewis, the infamous Beverly Lewis. Hi, guys.
Hi.
So good to see you.
Good to see you, Lori. Thanks for asking us.
Yeah, this is a real treat.
We're just really so proud of any of the people that are in this region that, you know, have a hand in taking things to the next level. And I can remember talking to Perry a long time ago when he was just thinking about making this movie. I can remember a little further down the line, at the very end of your Kickstarter campaign, we held a CFAA meeting where you spoke in person and talked about the movie and what it was going to be. I remember asking you about, you know, specific questions, and you were like, you know what? I'm not even going to think about that right now. I'm just going to make this movie. And so now we are so past that. We've had the premieres. Yeah. The movie has been seen. We've had several different screenings. You've had great festival traction. I mean, that's incredible. And now it is available on Amazon. I don't know if there's any other platforms, but I know Amazon Prime, you can get it. So
there's a whole bunch of platforms, actually, and you can find all that out on the website for the film, which is thedividemotionpicture.com.
Thedividemotionpicture.com.
There must be, I think there's 10 or 12 platforms that you can get it on.
Excellent. Good, because the more the better. And in this world, you've probably learned as much as most in the new world of distribution, which is something I want to have you really touch on too. So I want to, again, acknowledge that, Beverly, your contribution to this region. And I think one of the things that's always tickled me is you have such a great friendship with Perry. You were a film commissioner that assisted him, but I could see very quickly that, you know, you were bending over backwards to make his dream come true and help him in so many ways.
Yeah.
Well, many people did that. Perry's one of those people that you just, you know, if he asks, you're just there for him.
Thanks. It's true, Beverly. You helped me so much for years before I ever made it, you know. But Beverly, the thing that's so characteristic of Beverly is that she loves film. She loves, like a lot of us, but that's, you know, for a professional and for somebody working for the state, I mean, she loves it and she wants to see it go well and she wants to see things happen. She wants filmmakers to get what they want out of the day's work. And I've seen her time and time again go way, way past any requirement to help people get their shot, get their day, you know. Right. And a lot of people are going to miss her an awful lot. I'm not sure how, you know, I just think people are going to be shocked at what an empty spot she's going to leave when she retires. But I'm happy for you, Beverly, because I know it's time for you to do that. You want to move on and get on to other stuff.
Well, you know, this isn't supposed to be about interviewing me this hour, but
yeah, but it should be.
You shouldn't retire, Beverly.
Yeah, but I mean, it's very humbling. I mean, you brought some tears to my eyes. You know, it's just So, so the one thing that I will say with my official hat, and this is my last official, I guess, appearance as the film commissioner, because my last day in the office is next Thursday, November 19th. My wonderful part-time assistant, Julie Johnston, is still there. She's going to be holding down the fort. She won't be working on Fridays. So get those applications in early, or if you have questions, make sure you don't call on a Friday. There'll be people who take the call, but they won't be in the film commission. And the other thing is about COVID and filming in our county. Our county has not set up any specific regulations regarding filming, so only the state requirements regarding filming apply. So if you go to our website on the homepage, we have a link to something called the COVID-19 Production Readiness Kit. And it's a document that has links to all the information you need at the state level about what those regulations are. And we have a series of FAQs about like how many people can film at a location in Placer County. It all reverts back to the state, but it's a really great resource for productions when you're planning to shoot in our area, and our permits are still free. Okay, enough of that. Let's get to Perry.
But I'm hoping, Beverly, that you continue to have a hand in film production around the whole area, around Placer County and Sacramento and everything, as a freelancer, maybe as a independent contractor, as a consultant. I mean, I'm just laying that out there. Anybody who's planning to make a movie, if you get Beverly working with you and for you and helping you, you'll never regret it. I promise you.
Well, all things are possible. All things are on the table, but I'm not making any decisions just yet.
Okay. You know, with COVID, nobody's making any decisions, so you're okay with that.
Yes. So, shall we just jump in here, Perry? And
yeah,
sure.
Again, thanks for the nice words and intros for both of us, Lori. That's great.
Yeah, thank you.
So, director, producer, actor. I know you don't say writer, but you have lots of ideas. Multi-hyphenate, Perry King. So you just have been enjoying 50 years of a very diverse and rich career. And many of those years were spent acting. So I'm just going to jump in there with the first question and ask you about acting. And you've done stage acting. I don't think people know that about you, but you have done stage acting and stage directing as well. But let's just start off with, is there a difference between film acting and stage acting? Go for it.
Yeah, I don't think so. And Beverly, you know this story, but when I was doing the first film I ever got to do was something called The Possession of Joel Delaney. And I was playing Joel Delaney, and it was a movie with Shirley MacLaine. So I'm playing the title lead in a movie with Shirley MacLaine, and it was a wonderful part. It was two parts, really. It was her brother, who was very troubled and confused, and then he gets possibly possessed by the spirit of a dead murderer, or he's crazy, you never know which. But in either case, it was a totally different part. So it's two parts. I mean, I remember when I was doing that film, this was in 1971, 50 years ago. And I thought, wow, what a great way to start. I thought, this is pretty cool. I assumed that all the next parts would be even better. Well, I tell you, that's, I think, maybe still the best part I've ever had. The first one up. But anyway, first day of shooting, Shirley MacLaine was watching. She was producing this as well as starring in it. And the operator, the camera operator, said, "God damn it, Perry." He said, "You just missed your mark for the third time. What's wrong with you?" And I looked at him and said, "What's a mark?"
Jump in here because Perry's been in drama school. You were at Juilliard. Yes. So you had a lot of very formal acting training, right? Now you get a break on a movie. Very, first thing up. And
I'd even shot student films, but we didn't know enough about making movies when we were students to even have something like a mark. Anyway, Shirley MacLaine saw this, and she was producing, and you guys know that a film set, a minute costs $300, $400, $500, $1,000, depending on the set. And she was producing this, so it was her money or she was responsible. But she said, the moment she heard me say, "What's a mark?" she said, "Okay, everybody, go have a coffee, take a break." And she sat me down and she said, "Okay, pay attention. I'm going to, for the next 45 minutes, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know about acting on film." And she did. She said, "All right, a mark is this. The reason for a mark is that." You know, you guys know, but for anybody out there who doesn't know what a mark is, it's just where you have to stand. So, or you walk to the mark so the camera can be focused on you. It's for focal purposes for the camera. So much of what you have to do as an actor on film is so the camera can see it properly. And it's very invasive because you want to be just in the moment and believing what's happening. But there has to be a chunk of your head that's always stage managing what you're doing. So she taught me a mark and matching and overlaps and key lights and all this stuff. And the single most important thing, I think, at this point, after 50 years that she taught me, and most actors never figure this out, is film geography. And what is film geography? Film geography is camera right, camera left. And why is that important? You know, for example, we're doing a shot, we do a master shot, and then we do a single of somebody, and I'm talking to them, but now I'm off camera. Am I camera left or camera right? And why am I there? And if you know that and you understand the geography of a set and why that's important, it helps you keep track of things so much. And very few actors have any idea of that stuff. It's very valuable. But my point is that it took her less than an hour to teach me all the film technique I would ever need. And that's what she said. And it's perfectly true. From that point on, acting is just acting. It can be on stage, it can be on film, it can be radio. I've done a lot of radio acting. I'm the second of 3 people to ever play the part Han Solo. I did it on radio for National Public Radio. And we did all together, I think it was close to 20 hours of radio shows of Star Wars, all Lucasfilm, all Lucas material, stuff he hadn't used in the films that he gave NPR for the price of $1.
Wow.
Oh, I got to tell you a funny story about that. When we had to sign our contracts to do the Star Wars on radio, I read the contract from Lucasfilm, and it said, signing here, I agree that anything I do for the rest of my life in perpetuity throughout the universe belongs to George Lucas. And I thought, what? I can't sign this. And I asked the other actors, we were all handed the contracts just before we started taping the show. And they all said, oh, I'm not going to sign that. And I said, wait a minute, I want to sign it. I'm going to sign it. I did sign it. I thought I want to see him try and collect. It was just a joke, I'm sure. They just thought, because they didn't care about this radio show. Lucas just did it to be generous to NPR and National Public Radio, you know, and he said he wanted to do that because back at that time, he said, any little kid that can't afford the price of a ticket, well, at least they'll be able to hear it for free on radio.
Nice.
And you wouldn't think that would work on radio at all. Star Wars, it's such a visual thing, but it worked so well.
I would love to hear that.
Yeah, do you know if it's available to be?
Oh, I'm sure it's available. I have copies of it, so I'll lend you my copy, but I'm sure it's out there. Sure. I don't know how you get it, but it's so good. It's really, because we used all of Ben Burtt's sound effects.
Oh,
and I'll tell you, it was the most fun acting I've ever done in my whole life. Radio acting. I've done a lot of radio acting, actually. A lot of voiceover. My point is, I think really it's all the same. It's the same process. There's different techniques. On stage, the technique, you have to learn certain techniques. You have to be able to project. Like I did a Few Good Men on Broadway. I played Nathan Jessup, right? You can't handle the truth. I played that part. But you've got to project. You've got to it was a 1,000-seat theater. We weren't mic'd. You had to be able to fill that place. That's a technique. And that's different than film. You know, you don't need that on film at all. In fact, quite the opposite. The biggest problem with film is getting small enough so that it's tiny. Tell you a good story about that. I did a movie many years ago with James Mason, who was, of all the wonderful people I've worked with, and I've been so lucky, but of all of them, the finest was James Mason. He was just glorious to work with, and so kind and so generous, and taught me so much, and just treated me like his son. You know, at the time I was, I don't know, in my late 20s, I think, or something. Anyway, one day he did a take in this movie, and the crew applauded him at the end of the take, and he was very gracious, and he said, thank you so much. Thank you. He took a little bow, and then he walked over to the director, Richard Fleischer, who was a superb director and very underrated. Nobody remembers him. He did Soylent Green. He did 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Richard Fleischer. Oh. Very, very unappreciated director, but a wonderful director. And he whispered to the director, but I could hear him. He said, excuse me, sir, I hate to ask you, but could you give me another take, please? And Richard Fleischer, for all his experience, and he'd worked with Mason before, he said, why? You just got applause from the crew. It was so wonderful. And Mr. Mason said, I can't call him James. I can only call him Mr. Mason ever. He said, it's because if they could see it, it was way too big. Mm-hmm. It must have been too big and it won't look good when you see it. It won't work.
Hmm.
So he did another take. The crew was kind of surprised, but they're doing another take. And that take was noticeably smaller and much more internal. And at the end of it, Richard Fleischer looked at Mr. Mason, and Mr. Mason nodded, and he said, "Good, print that," and we move on. But that's a really, I'll never forget that, because that was a hell of a lesson right there. You know, imagine you get applause, you'd think, well, what could be better? No. Mr.
So,
Mason, James Mason knew how big it had to be. So it's all the same thing, I really think. And film, there's a lot of classes in LA that teach film technique, and they teach it for weeks and months, even years. And I'm sorry to say, I think it's bullshit. You don't need years. You need, Shirley MacLaine showed me, you need 45 minutes to an hour. And at the end of that time, if you paid attention, that's all you need. The rest of it is just the pure event of acting, whatever the hell that is.
that's different. Acting, you mentioned in the past to me that you can learn more and more about acting all the time.
Oh, you can spend your life. I have spent. But here's what James Mason said about acting. To me, he said this. He said, what we're paid to do, these are his words, I memorized them. He said, what we're paid to do is to believe that what's happening is really happening and it's never happened before. And he said, it's that simple. It's not easy, but it's simple.
Yeah.
And he said that to me because we were doing a scene one day. I'm playing his son, and I had this notebook filled with pages of notes, and I was going over all these notes. I was an academic. I'd gone to Yale. You know, I was taught to think with a pen. And I had endless notes about what I wanted to accomplish in that scene and make sure it was in it. And he said to me, "Perry, you should throw that notebook away." He said, "You should just throw it away. You've done all the preparation. It'll be there. All you're doing is tying yourself up in knots." And that's what he said. What we're paid to do is to believe that what's happening is really happening. He said, it'll be there. You don't have to worry. And I trusted him with my life. Absolutely. So I did exactly what he said. I threw the notebook away. I have no idea where it went. Never saw it again.
So with
And just to finish that story, and my acting in that film immediately took a big step up. I immediately went to a plane I'd never been to before because I was just doing what he said. I was believing it.
and those successes came repeatedly that at the beginning of your career, and you went from one film to another. So
Well, it may look like that in retrospect, but
Yes.
it sure didn't feel like that.
but it's like, I mean, back in the
It
day,
never does.
if an actor was in a couple of films a year, that was quite a good track record, back in the, I'm from that era too. So
Yeah. No, that was it was good, but it's always so painful, and being a freelancer is so disturbing, and you always think that it's over. You'll never get another job, and you never know why you work or why you don't. I remember at the wrap party for that film, James Mason was there, and he was saying to me, "That's it." He said, "I'm never going to work again. I know it. This is it. It's over." Then he went off to get a drink, and I asked his wife, "Why is he worried? He's James Mason. My God, of course it will." She said, "Oh, he's that way at every film. Every film, he thinks it's the end of everything." And he went on that year to do 4 more movies. That year, he was prolific. Another great thing he did, I got to tell you this, because this is the kind of stuff that's so valuable for people to hear. And this is exactly what I did with The Divide, very consciously, very aware. He said to me, a few years before we did that film, he said, he looked in the mirror at himself, and he said, "Well, I'm getting old. The days of being able to play a leading man, even an older leading man, are pretty much over," he said. So what he did, he said, was he very intentionally gained a little weight, started to look crappy, didn't shave very well, let his hair get too long, made himself look crummy. And then he went all over London, he said, and made sure everybody saw him all over the place. And he knew they'd say to themselves, "Oh, James Mason's starting to look old. He's not aging very well. You know what? He'd be perfect for the part of blah, 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 blah." And he made the transition from older leading man to character actor instantly. Just got it over with. And you know what I look like in The Divide, you two, because you guys have seen the movie. That's exactly what I was thinking. I thought, okay, I'm not going to waste any time. I'm going to look like an old homeless, but that character should have looked like.
Mhm.
And I wanted to look, my only makeup in that film was I would rub my hands in the dirt on the back of my truck, and then I'd rub my face with the dirt a little bit. That's it. That's all I did for makeup the whole film.
So,
And it worked perfectly, I thought.
so I wanted to ask you about, again, you were getting steady work, more or less, right? But you went out on auditions. So,
Oh, yeah.
we all know about auditions are kind of the bane of an actor's existence. But
Yes.
what was your experience since you were getting parts fairly steadily from time to time? Tell us about the audition experience for an actor.
Well, the first thing I remember from that time was that I was going to Juilliard, and through a series of sort of lucky accidents, I got the opportunity to audition for 2 movies and a play, Broadway. A Broadway play to replace Ken Howard in Child's Play. And then I also auditioned for The Possession of Joel Delaney. And I also auditioned for Slaughterhouse-Five. And because I was at Juilliard, and it never occurred to me I'd get any of those parts. I remember going to those auditions just thinking, I'll try to put into practice what I'm learning at Juilliard. And I just assumed they'd throw me out the door within 30 seconds. And that's why I got those parts, because I had no burden on me, no pressure, no expectations whatsoever. The only time in my life I felt that way. And every other actor at those auditions was thinking, oh my God, I got to get this part. I need it. I need it to pay my rent. I need it because I want to act so badly, And that is the worst feeling in the world. That's the most inhibiting thing you can feel. Now, then I went off and I did those jobs. And John Houseman was running Juilliard, the icon, John Houseman. And all the teachers at Juilliard said, turn that work down and stay and study. You can do it later after you've gone through Juilliard. And that seemed crazy to me. So I went to John Houseman and said, what should I do? I have these parts. What do I do? And he said, an actor, I think that an actor should work when he can work and study when he can't. So he said, go do the jobs. If you want to come back, the door's open. And I just never got back because I kept working. But after those jobs, then I had to audition again. Now I've got what's the perfect batting in baseball? What is that, 500?
I thought it was 1,000.
Is it 1,000? I forget. I'm not a baseball player, as you can tell.
Somebody in chat can tell us.
Let's assume it's 1,000. Okay, batting 1,000. So I'd been batting 1,000 thus far. So I went to a 4th audition months later after having done those 3 jobs. And I didn't get the job. And I thought I was going to die. And that was the end of my feeling like, the golden boy. And in fact, a few years later, I'm in the unemployment line in Hollywood. This really happened. This is so funny. And there were 2 guys ahead of me. In the unemployment line in Hollywood is all actors and actresses. I mean, that's all that's there, right? And these 2 actors in front of me one was saying to the other, listen, he said, hang in there, buddy. You'll get a gig. You'll get a break. I promise you. He said, a few years ago, I was in New York, and this kid out of nowhere got this movie, The Possession of Joel Delaney. Everybody wanted it. And he got it, If he can do it, so can you. And I tapped him on the shoulder. I really did. And I said, I hate to tell you this, but I'm that guy, and I'm standing behind you in the unemployment line. And their faces fell. I destroyed their dreams. Their last shred of hope was ruined.
That's funny.
But the valuable thing is, and I was telling Laurie this, and you know this about me, I've been helped by so many wonderful people and extraordinary, skillful, talented people, and helped along my way so many times. And my fondest hope right now is to tell these things and tell these stories and pass this along, pass it forward. Anybody out there who wants to be an actor, who wants to be a director, who is an actor, who is a director, and needs help, all this stuff, I really want to lend a hand in any way I can. And that's why I go to this acting school in LA, the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, and help out periodically when I can. And the main thing I do is I tell them what it's like. I say, I've been doing for 50 years now what you want to do, and I'll tell you the truth straight up as far as I understand it and help you any way I can. And they always want to know it about auditions. That's the thing they always want to hear about. And I've learned a lot about auditions, an awful lot, some of which is very helpful. I'd say the most valuable thing that I've learned about auditions is that you go into them thinking, I can play this part. I can do this part. I know I can do it. And then you don't get the job. Almost all the time, you don't get the gig. And you feel so frustrated and so personally insulted and so rejected personally. And it hurts so much because you know you could play the part. And because I've been on both sides, because I've been on the other side, the casting side, several times, the people doing the casting have a whole complicated agenda. And almost all the time they say no to you. It's not personal. It's nothing personal about it. You just don't fit their agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I really believe that, having done thousands of auditions now at this point, thousands of, what are they? Job interviews, basically. And they're miserable. You know, most people in their life do half a dozen job interviews, maybe. I've done thousands. The moment the door opens in an audition, as it swings open, it's over. 95% of the time, at least, it's already over. They've already looked at you. I know, because I've been on the other side. They've already looked at you and thought, nope, that's not the person. Sorry, but that's not the person. What they'd like to say is, you know what? Don't waste our time. Don't waste your energy. Just turn around and leave. Thank you for coming here. Nothing personal. You're just not the person we're looking for. But they can't. So what do you do with that time then? If you're going to do this audition, even though they're sitting there thinking, I don't care what this person does, this is not what we need. So what do you do? Well, the answer is you have fun. You have as much fun as you can and treat it like a day's work, and you can learn a lot from it. And frankly, mess with them. What the hell? I mess with them all the time. They say, do you have any questions? And I say, yeah, I got a lot of questions. How much time have you got? You know, I love to screw with them because they're always busy as hell. They're always anxious for you to get done and leave so they can get to the next. If anybody ever in an audition, if I catch them out of the corner of my eye looking at their watch, I always stop and say, I'm sorry, I don't think this is going very well. Can I start again, please? Which is just exactly what they don't want you to do. Because if they're going to look at their watch while I'm acting, screw them. They're going to get it right back in their face. You know? Laurence Olivier says you should always do something outrageous in an audition, he said. He said, you may not get the part, but they won't forget you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm all for that. I'm absolutely all for that. I think it's so, you know, for a long, long time, I would do auditions the way I play pool, the way most people play pool, which is some days I was hot, most days I wasn't, right? And I never knew why. Often I do very bad auditions, really bad ones. And I'd get so angry at myself. And finally, one day, I remember many years ago, but now very clear memory, that I thought, this is unacceptable. I'm a professional actor. I know that if I've got the job, when I go to rehearsal for stage or when I do my first day on the shoot, I'm always okay. I'm always acceptable. That's the worst I ever am. Now, I have a lot of trouble being better than okay, and I need help from the other actors, from the director, but I'm never less than fine. You know, you can print my takes on film, first take, certainly second take, print and walk away. Why are my auditions terrible? And finally, I sat down and I was really angry with myself, and I thought, this is just not acceptable. And I figured out why. It was my attitude, not the acting. I know how to do it as well as I can. To whatever degree I'm an actor, that's what I'd bring to it. But my attitude would stink. I'd resent going in there. So I thought, okay, I've got to figure out a way to walk in that door with a great attitude every time, with the attitude of a winner, because that's really what they're looking for. They can't put into words most of the time what they want, but they're looking basically for a winner, whatever that is, right? Because everybody wants to hire a winner. So what I'd do is I'd work gratitude. We all know gratitude. And it's part of a lot of 12-step programs, and AA teaches gratitude. Gratitude is one of the most powerful things you can use in your life. So before I do an audition, I'd sit in my car for a half an hour at least, and I'd write it down. I'm a great believer that you write stuff down. It helps you. And I'd start writing down everything I have in my life to be grateful for. My older daughter, Louise, my younger daughter, Hannah, my granddaughter, Kiki, motorcycles, my ranch, my friends, Beverly, whoever, all this stuff. After half an hour, I've got a long list on a yellow legal pad. I've got a big, long list of stuff I'm grateful for. At any point in your life, any of us, you can make a list of the stuff you're grateful for, and you can make another list of the stuff that you hate, that you wish wasn't true. But for this purpose, you're only interested in the stuff you're grateful for. I'd do that for a good half hour. I'd walk out into the office. The door would open. I would walk through that door on top of the world. I didn't need the job. What do I need this job for? I've got this whole list of stuff I'm grateful for that I've got in my life. And from that point on, my audition, I started nailing them. Didn't mean I got the job most of the time, because you just don't. But I would nail the audition. I'd walk out thinking, yeah, that's about as well as I could have done that. And that's all you can do. If you walk out thinking, I showed them what I could do. It's up to them, but I showed them what I could do. But that was what my problem was. And I've taught that to a lot of young actors and kids at the American Academy. It's really powerful. You've got to find a way to walk through that door on top of the world.
So you told me that, gratitude will get you so far, right? But you've also told me that sometimes you think you've got a part and you had an experience where you thought you were a shoo-in for a part and you went into the audition.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. There was a time when years ago, I was reading breakdowns at my agent's office. Breakdowns are synopses of what they're casting, right? And actors aren't supposed to ever see those, but my agent would let me look at them. And I was reading this breakdown for a TV movie, and it seemed really interesting. And I read some of the script that was there, and I liked it. And it said for the lead part, it said a Perry King type. I thought, wow, great. I called him up. I said, hi, I'm Perry King. And I said, I'd like to play that part. And they said, oh, no, I'm sorry. We said a Perry King type, but we met a young Perry King. You're too old for the part. I couldn't get it. They wouldn't hire me for the Perry King type. So you can't begin to imagine how many different ways you can be rejected as an actor.
That's right up there with having your name as part of a Jeopardy clue.
Well, you know the story. You know the story, the genesis of the life of an actor, and I'll use my name, but you could use any actor's name. And the life of an actor is, who's Perry King? Get me Perry King. Get me a Perry King type. Get me a young Perry King. Who's Perry King? That's the life story of an actor.
Wow.
I'll tell you somebody that hardly anybody remembers. Good example. And he's the guy that said the smartest thing. He was the first incredibly generous guy to me. Claude Rains. Do you remember Claude Rains, Lori? Barely, I know you do. So Claude, but a lot of people listening won't know who I'm talking about. He was the first Invisible Man, wonderful stage actor. So Claude Rains was an old man when I met him. This was back in the mid-'60s. And my father's best friend, my father was a doctor, his best friend was Claude Rains' doctor. Rains was very ill, dying, struggling to stay alive as long as he could because he had a young son he wanted to be there for as much as he could. And so it was set up for me to meet Claude Rains. Claude Rains gave me an afternoon of his life when he had very few of those left. Imagine that generosity. And he spent an afternoon with me because he knew I was, I don't know, maybe I was 15 at the time, pimples, braces. And I wanted to be an actor. And here was Claude Rains. He was everything I wanted to be, everything. And I listened all day, and this wonderful shock of hair that he had was all gone. He was very feeble, but his eyes, I remember, were burning and bright, filled with life. And he told me stories of he and Vivian Lee working in London on the West End, and they would do, one night they do Julius Caesar, and the next night they do Caesar and Cleopatra, Bernard Shaw, back to back, back to back. What an incredible thing to do. I mean, stories like that. So at the end of the afternoon, my father was dragging me out the door and said, come on, leave him alone. You've exhausted him. Let him be. And I didn't want to go. And I said, but I had to. My father insisted, and he was right, of course. And I was leaving, and at the door, I said, Mr. Rains, before I leave, please tell me what's the most important thing for me to remember from today. And this is what he said. And it gives me such joy to say this anytime I tell people this story. And I tell young actors this all the time. And I've got to do his voice because I can hear his voice in my head. He said, the most important thing is enthusiasm. And then, boom, he closed the door. And he knew exactly what he was doing. He was handing that to me like a gift. Clear as a bell. He was saying, here, kid, you take this and run with it. It's been good to me. See what you can do with it. And that is what I have. I've had a 50-year acting career. Anybody who knows the life of actors knows to pay your bills for 50 years is almost impossible with acting. But I've done it. And the way I did it is enthusiasm.
And gratitude.
And gratitude. But it's two sides of the same coin, actually. It's utterly incredible what you can overcome with enthusiasm in life, not just in acting, not just in showbiz. But you guys know, but many people don't realize that if you're the actor, director, film commissioner, most of the time things don't go well. As an actor, most of the time I've done a lot of TV, American TV. Most of the time the script stinks. The director is a traffic cop and couldn't care less if it's good or bad. The other actors are totally self-involved and usually not very good and can't help you. You're on your own. What do you do? And the answer is enthusiasm. Show up at 5 a.m. saying, this is going to be great. You won't believe how good this is going to be today. It's incredible what that can get you through. You know who was brilliant at it? A good friend back in the day? Natalie Wood. She was a good friend of mine. I think we did 3 shows together altogether. Now, if anybody had a right, excuse me, I've got allergies, I'm sniffling. But if anybody had a right to be jaded in this world, it was Natalie Wood. She'd been a movie star since she was 6 years old, right? And she used to get just swarmed by paparazzi, and so many things she'd have to put up with. And man, I never knew anybody with as much enthusiasm as she did. She would do exactly what I just described. She'd show up while it was still dark outside, absolutely right out of bed, ready to go, sitting in the makeup chair saying, oh, this is so good, this scene. I love this scene. Wait till you see what I'm going to do. I can't wait to see what you're going to do with your side of it. Oh, it just fills the day you can beat the odds all the time. When things are good, when the script's great and the other actors are wonderful and pulling you up with them and the director is inspiring, hell, you don't need technique. You don't need anything. But it's not like that. It's just never like that. It's usually an uphill fight.
Unless you make your own film. So I was going to ask the question, but I think it's pretty obvious.
Well, that's part of why I did.
But so what spurred you on to make The Divide after many, many years of acting and film and television, directing some of the Riptide episodes? But I definitely want to get some time here for you to talk about The Divide. So what you...
Yeah, I think it's very common. I'm not sure that I've ever known an actor that didn't, or an actress. Today you use that word for both actors and actresses. I don't think I've ever known an actor who didn't want to make their own film, their own project. So it's pretty common impulse, but it was always in my head to do it. And as the years went by, it became clearer and clearer kind of what I wanted that film to be. I knew, for example, I wanted it to be black and white. I knew I wanted it to be very old-fashioned because I love old movies. Really love the films from the late 30s. You know, one of the mysteries of the world is how did they make so many brilliant movies in 1939?
Yeah.
So 1939 is the year that most of the greatest movies in the world were made. It's incredible. I don't know how they did that.
Wizard of Oz, Gone with the Wind.
Oh, everything's 1939. It's incredible. But anyway, that's the era of movies I like, and John Ford and that stuff.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So you knew you wanted to do a black and white picture before you even had that script? Because I can tell you, I think that the black and white nature of the film is a character in itself. Absolutely. That is perfect for this movie.
I think so too. But we evolved the film around some of those ideas. We being Jana Brown and I. Jana Brown is a lady I met because she was working for a prep school that I went to many years before she was there. And she was looking for graduates of that school to do articles about for the alumni magazine. And she contacted me and said, I want to talk to you about your experience at St. Paul's. And I said, you don't want to talk to me. St. Paul's doesn't want to hear about what I think about that school. Trust me. I hated that place, hated my time there with a passion. It was a great education, but I hated that place, just hated it. Gary Trudeau, you guys know who Gary Trudeau is? The guy who did Doonesbury. Gary Trudeau was a friend of mine at the school, was my roommate at Yale the first year I was there. And Gary was at that prep school, and Gary swears to me that I'm unfair and that school doesn't deserve that at all. He said the reason it was so awful when we were there was the headmaster was terrible. That may be true. I don't know. But anyway, but Janice said, well, let me do an article about you. I'll just write about your career. So we did that. And at the end of that, we both agreed we'd had so much fun doing that, just long distance on the phone. We'd never met. We said, we got to do something else. So we thought, well, let's try and write a screenplay. And she said, we did do one before The Divide, but basically what she said was, I said, I want to make a Western. And for one thing, I own this incredible 500-acre cattle ranch at that point. It's the perfect place to shoot it. I mean, you know, so many of the problems you have on sets, as you know, Beverly, are the filmmakers fighting with the location owners, right? And I thought, well, I'll never have a fight with the location owner. It's me. So he'll let me do anything I want, right? So we did. So we wrote the screenplay with the location in mind. We started with the location and the barnyard and all that stuff. And I told her I'm going to make it black and white. So she wrote it with that in mind, you know. We evolved it around drought. We got really lucky. We happened to shoot it the year California was having the biggest drought they'd had since 1976, which is when we set the film, which is the previous big drought. So we evolved it in a funny way, but the story was Jana's story. And I told her certain things. I knew I wanted it to be about a father and a daughter because I have two daughters and it's so important to me, my daughters and my relationship with them. And I knew I wanted it to be the theme of redemption. There aren't a lot of themes. There are only a handful of themes. And the theme that always moves me the most is redemption. Rocky, for example, was a redemption picture. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a theme that moves everybody. Who doesn't need redemption for something? We all understand the concept of redemption. Yeah. So Jana took those parameters and she evolved the story with pictures of my ranch and the barnyard in her mind. And then we started to hone the script. And God, we went through dozens of versions of it. I was supposed to write half of it. That was the original idea. But it quickly turned out that I couldn't do it. She could and I couldn't. Mm-hmm. So what I was able to do, though, having read thousands, at least hundreds of scripts in my life, is I could read what she'd written and then give her good feedback. And like I say, we honed it and honed it and honed it and honed it for the longest time. She's since written a second screenplay that is impeccable. She's utterly amazing, Jana. She is so skillful, so good. She learned all the lessons that were there to be learned. So the second screenplay she written reads like a shooting script. You
Yeah.
read it and you think, I wouldn't want to change a word, not a word.
You lucked out by having so many talented people work on that. And I just wanted to make note that Joe Haskin just popped in and said hi.
Oh, good.
Really? Did she?
Yeah.
Where?
Yeah,
Oh,
Joe's
is she
here.
on? Ah,
Joe
is she
has.
staying? That? Yeah, is she staying to talk to us? I hope so.
She's here. Yeah, she's online, so we'll see
Oh,
when she
great.
can hang out.
Yeah.
But she
She
popped
was,
in to
she was
say,
our producer, and you're
she
so
said I
right
was
about that.
scrolling by and see 3 of my favorite people. So,
Great. Oh, that's wonderful. Now,
Yes.
Joe said Joe did such a great job on that film too. Oh my God, she's instrumental in making The Divide. But I remember one day when we were first starting to put it together, and I showed her, the screenplay she'd read, and she knew what we were hoping to do on my ranch. And I said, so what will this film cost to do? And she said, no, Perry, that's backwards. You tell me what you're willing to spend,
Mhm.
and we'll make the movie for that. Now, depending on the budget, it'll be a different film. But she said, you start with the amount you're willing to put into it. And that was just such a lesson, on how to make it.
Did you have funding other than your own pocket, or was this something you solely
Well,
self-funded?
we did a Kickstarter for pre-production, but honestly, at the end,
Yeah.
and we did well in the Kickstarter. I forget what
Yeah.
we raised.
You raised your goal, I remember.
We
'cause
did. We raised, and I
might
forget
be
what our
fun.
goal is, 30, 40,000 maybe or something for pre-production. And we kept all those people on that contributed part of it and gave them everything we promised them and everything. But at the end of that, we all agreed that if we had to make it would have been more efficient for us to go work for McDonald's or something, because we were putting so much work into that Kickstarter that we were earning like $1.50 an hour or something.
It's hard. It's hard.
So I did, and I could have gotten funding in Hollywood. I had several sources that were willing to fund the film, but they all said the same thing, and I don't blame them one bit. They're business people. I understand money, and they all said, "Okay, if you're going to do this movie, we want to make your movie. We're going to give you the money to make it, but we got to talk about a few things." The first thing up was always it's got to be in color. That was always the first. Second thing was we need more action, more violence. Third was always we need love scenes and nudity, and all of which I'd say to them, no. You give me the money, I'll go off and make the movie I want to make, and then I'll give it to you. And they said, no, I'm not going to do that if I'm going to put the money up. And I'd say, I don't blame you a bit. I wouldn't do it either. But that's the way it's going to be. So in the end, I thought, screw it. I'm not going to lie on my deathbed and think, God, I never got to make my movie. I'm not going to do that. So I paid for it myself. It was the only way to do it my own way. And it was a very necessary, useful thing to do. Because that way I would say, at least 10 times a day, I'd say, look, this is my movie. When it's your movie, you can do it that way. People would say, no, you're doing it wrong. You should do X, Y, or Z. And I'd say, no, this is my movie. We're going to do this my way. I'm paying for the privilege. When you have your movie, you can do it your way. So I recognize that a lot of people out there want to make films. They will not have that luxury. I understand. And it was a huge luxury, but it meant that I got to make Joe and Jana Brown and Russ Rayburn, who's our cinematographer and operator, and we made the movie we meant to make, which I'm not sure I have anything else in my whole life that I could say that about. That something that I tried to do turned out to be what I meant it to be.
And one of the things funding it yourself gave you was the luxury of time.
Yes.
I remember that you said you were not going to be rushed about putting the crew together or whatever. And you did a lot of research watching black and white films. Can you share some of the black and white films that kind of informed the look of your own film?
In fact, before we started shooting, Russ and Jana and I, watched a number of films so that we'd have a kind of common vocabulary. Not all of them were black and white. There were some others that weren't, that we thought would teach us some things, and we learned tremendous things. But Paper Moon was one of the black and white films we watched. A movie recently called Eva, or they call it Ida, and it's a Polish film. But we would say Ida, I think, but they call it Ida.
He was Academy Award winner a couple
of years ago. Magnificently beautiful film. And he did one just recently came out called, another one that's also black and white, called Cold War. That's also just a wonderful film, but also magnificently beautiful. But Paper Moon, John Ford Westerns, we'd watch John Ford Westerns all the time. He was a great believer in black and white. John Ford said, black and white is real photography. But Beverly, you touched on a really important thing. The one place where I spent my money was time, because that's the one thing that always seems to be not available on film sets. I mean, I've worked on multi-million-dollar movies, and the moment you get to the set, they say, hurry up, come on, we're running out of time. Hurry up, we're losing the light. Hurry, 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 we're behind schedule. And I wanted to show up and say, okay, so I'll have a cup of coffee, take a deep breath. Let's talk about what we're going to do today. Let's take our time. And we did. We actually ended up ending a day and a half early, I think we were, because we used all our time. We didn't need a day and a half of I think we had 30 shooting days. We were shooting 5-6 day weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And which is a luxurious schedule for a small independent movie. Excuse me for interrupting, but a normal schedule would be, if I'd gotten the funding from somebody in Hollywood, they would have given me 12, maximum 15 days, and I had 30. And I really wanted to be able to do it, to work on a scene, and at the end of the day say, you know what, it's not good enough. We're going to come back to this tomorrow, and we'll just push everything ahead. And we did that a couple of times.
Yeah. I wanted to just make a note, because we're talking about it, and it'll bring up other questions, but we have that trailer. If Reggie, you want to play the trailer for?
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea, because that'll inform
Reggie's
everybody.
our engineer. He's our elf on the shelf back there that takes care of all the business.
Thanks, Reggie.
Thank you.
One thing I'd like to forget. It's the only thing I seem to remember.
What are you doing out here?
We know the owner.
Does he look like me?
Here.
Working around here? I'm working at the Kincaid Ranch. Been there about a month or so.
Stop standing around. Get it fired. You gotta understand why the holes are there in the first place.
Man needs stitches. Your father's Sam Kincaid, right? You're his daughter, Sarah.
I don't have a daughter. Why do you think I have a daughter?
Keep your head still. Any confusion?
He's forgetful sometimes. Is there a chance Sam could have had an injury before?
Sarah?
You know, I'm the one who's supposed to be angry.
Who's this?
My son. My mom always told me you were her hero.
You don't give an inch, do you?
Do you ever do that in front of my kid again?
I need to show you something. Does this most nights.
He needs help. What?
Don't you go in there. It's not safe in there. There's ghosts in that barn. What the hell are you doing in here?
I was just looking.
Get out. Get out! Get out! Get out!
How's old Sam been treating you? He picked me up on the side of the road. I needed a place to stay. He needed a hand. Do you want some advice? I get the hell out of here.
So I take all I can get. All I can get. Yeah. Out there waiting for it. On my two hands. Get up. I can miss you again. Yeah, but I don't even know you yet. Yeah, I don't even know you.
Excellent.
Ah, thanks. It's like seeing an old friend again. I haven't seen that for a while.
I find when I watch movies that I've been involved in making, it's like a living memory book, and there is nothing better than to relive every line of things that you've worked on and you've put your blood, sweat, and tears in. So I know that's what this movie meant for you. My dad had Alzheimer's, and he has passed. And so it was right after he passed, and I really was affected by the message as well. And I loved that. I really felt like it was something that should be seen.
You know what I like so much about this film, and we never intended this really. I mean, we never thought about it. It just came out organically out of the film. But this is the only film I've ever seen about Alzheimer's that has an upbeat ending. And it's not twisted out of shape to be upbeat. Every other film I've ever seen, understandably, about Alzheimer's is very dark at the end.
Yeah.
But this film, in a weird way, Sam kind of beats the disease in a funny way. And I love that. I love it. And we were all dealing, my best friend of 45 years here in LA is, I almost never see him now. I mean, I see him, I go, but he's not there, you know? He's fading away inch by inch. And I spent an awful lot of time with people with Alzheimer's before I played the part. And I researched it, and one of the best things I found, oddly enough, was something that had been on Good Morning America, I think. They did a thing where they said to people, if you want to experience what your loved one with Alzheimer's is experiencing, they said, get a pair of shoes and make them uncomfortable. Stuff them with stuff so your feet are uncomfortable. Make a pair of gloves and tape your fingers up so you can't work your hands well. Put earphones on your head tuned to a station that's mostly static and that you can't understand, and put on glasses, like work glasses with tape on them so you can't see very well. And then try to do your chores. Try to go through your life, sort your laundry, wash the dishes, stuff like. I spent hours like that in my home alone, just trying to be that way, because I knew that as the director, I was not going to have any time to prepare on the set. So I was going to have to be able to say, roll camera, and then be Sam. Just be in his head. And I needed to evolve an understanding that I could just turn on like a switch. Spent lots of time talking to people with Alzheimer's and examine, just trying to watch them and hear them and ask them questions, always with their understanding. I'd say, I'm going to make a film about this, and I want to honor anyone who has this condition and portray it accurately, do it right. Anyway, I feel that because of that, I can help my friend a lot more than I could otherwise, because I understand exactly what's happening when, for the 5th time in 5 minutes, he says, "So how are you?" And instead of saying, I just told you, what's the matter with you? The other night, he's a Scotsman, and the other night he called me and said, "I'm just in a quandary. I don't know what to do. I think I should sell my house and go back to Scotland." And we talked for a long time about that. It's a bad idea, and that's what I told him. And I said, you can't go home again. It's not there. The life you left years ago when you were a young man is gone. But I said, do you realize we've had this conversation? And he said, we have? And I said, yeah, we've had this same conversation at least 12 times. But very gently, I said, do you know that? And he didn't know that, but he trusts me, so he wasn't offended by that. But said, so next time we have it, try to hang on to this. Try to see if you can hang on to any of these things, Stick them in a corner of your head and lock them down. See if you can. Anyway, it's a whole subject. We all have people. I'm so sorry about your problem.
Yeah. Al, and your friend. It's
Yeah.
figuring out how you can continue to communicate with them until you can't.
Yep.
It's really hard work, but it's so gratifying when you can break through. And I think that when you introduce music or dance or any kind of a recognition, or acting, if that was what they were involved in, if you can bring that recognition of the past to them, that's one of the best ways to get them to suddenly find that spark again, of who they were. It's so sad to see the people that you love, break away minute by minute and day by
It's terribly sad.
Yeah.
It's maybe the hardest thing in life is to help anybody through the end of their own life. And I've done it I'm sure you guys have too. I've done it so many times now. My parents and friends, and that it just always feels so messy and unsuccessful, and it's the one thing in life you can never win at. You're always going to lose, and all you can do is just hour by hour, day by day, try to help them be as dignified as they can be as they slowly leave, whether it's physical or Alzheimer's. Or
Yeah.
Alzheimer's seems to be maybe the meanest of all the ways to leave, because you're losing the identity of the person.
Yeah.
It's
But it was also a very, I want to say, a rewarding theme to explore, and how it affected the family. I mean, you made it for your daughters in part, is what I understand. So, this is a real ham-fisted segue, but I did want to ask how was it as an actor to direct other actors on your film? I mean, you've been directed for years yourself, but now you were directing actors.
And have you directed before this?
Well, I did on film. The only thing I ever directed was one episode of Riptide, that series I did in the 80s. And I was supposed to do more. It went well. But then we got canceled, as you always do on a series eventually. But I've directed a lot of stage. But it's true. I've read everything I could put my hands on of directors whom I respect and what they said about directing. And but the best thing I found was something Clint Eastwood said in an interview. At one point in an interview, he said, "When I'm directing, I try to be the director I want to have when I'm acting." And I thought, I know who that is. I know exactly who that director is. And that's a director who keeps his mouth shut unless he has to say something. That's a good director. A director who just says, "Cut. Yes, that was great. Just that. I loved it. No more than that. Or, if necessary, great. Let's do another. Try another. Shut up. Leave people alone. Let them do their work. Don't micromanage them." George Roy Hill, who directed Slaughterhouse-Five that I was in, but, the great director of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and The Sting and so many great movies. He said, when we were shooting Slaughterhouse at one point, he said to me, 50% of making a movie is casting. He said, if you do the casting right, the movie almost makes itself. And you can see it from some of his successes. And like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And so I did the whole casting process again, because it was my movie. I drove my casting director crazy. He'd say, "Okay, we'll call up and we'll get 30 people to come into the office, and we'll give them each 10 minutes, and we'll have a camera to record them, and I'll read the scenes with them, and you just sit back and we'll just go on one after the other for a long time, and that way you'll help get an idea." And I said, "No, we're not going to do any of that. That's the life I've led as an actor, being insulted by that process on a daily and weekly routine. I'm not going to do it." My auditions took 2 or 3 hours with each actor. And I only saw a handful of actors. I didn't audition anybody but Brian Kaplan for the part. What I did was I watched hours, hundreds of hours of film on everybody. I wanted to already be very excited about somebody if I was going to ask them to come in and audition for me. So I wanted to know their work very well already, or I wasn't going to ask them to come in. And I wanted to spend a lot of time with them so that you get past that initial stiffness and discomfort and nervousness. With Brian, we read a scene, we talked, we read the scene again, we talked some more. As I remember, then we flipped the roles, and he played Sam and I'd play Luke, and we'd read it that way, and we'd talk about it again. And then at the end of after 2 hours, I broke the biggest rule of all. I said to him, "So you want to play this part?" And he said, "I do." And I said, "You got it. It's yours." Mm-hmm. And we didn't talk to agents at all, you know. My casting man said to me, and he was great at the job. He helped me tremendously, but he said, "We've got to film everybody because, you know, then you can remember them." And I said, "If I can't remember them without film, I shouldn't cast them. Why would I cast them?" You know, because that's one of the things I hate the most. When you go to a casting session, they record you, and they're recording you in the worst possible way. It's a terrible shot. You're doing a scene opposite somebody who's, you know, you're playing a love scene, and the actual person reading the lines is an old fat guy, 60 years old, who's read the lines 60 times before that day, you know, bored to tears, and the lighting is fluorescence, overhead fluorescence. And you say, "Then why don't you go watch some of the film I've done where I'm really good and it looks good and it works well?" No, they insist on recording you in that way. Well, I wasn't going to do that to my actors. So everybody who auditioned for me, the few who did, I think had a really wonderful experience.
So one of the other things that was different about this for your actors is you shot everything in sequence.
Yes.
How often did that, and how did Joe like that experience?
Well, we built the whole schedule around shooting it in sequence, because shooting in sequence is very difficult to do. Excuse me, it's very inefficient. Yeah. You know, it's a terrible way to shoot stuff. My crew got so mad at me on shooting The Divide. I don't know, in that trailer you saw a shot of the barn at night, right? And they lit that barn at night 6 times at least. And I remember the last time they were lighting it, they said, "What the hell is going on? We've already done this lighting over and over and over." And I said to them, "Just please trust me. I swear to you, the film's going to be much better because of this, much better. Because if you shoot in sequence the way you do a play, it helps the actors grow with the story and know where the story is going." I only shot one other film in sequence. It's a film called A Different Story, and it's my personal favorite other than The Divide. It's the other film I've done that I really like. And a lot of what's so good about it comes from the fact that it was shot in sequence. So we, the actors, lived the story as it went through. And the same with The Divide. We lived it as it went along over 6 weeks, as opposed 5, 6 days. Yeah. 5 weeks. Over 5 weeks, we lived it as opposed to 2 hours, but we lived it. But it was very difficult to, you know, nobody liked it. My AD, who never did understand what I was doing on this, my assistant director, who, and Joe will laugh when she hears me talking about him, but he never understood why we were doing any of the things we were doing. He never could get it. I explained it to him, but he just didn't accept it. And he showed up the day right before we started shooting, and he was very late to a meeting. And I said, "What the hell? Why are you late? What's going on? That's ridiculous." And he said, "Well, I've redone the whole schedule." And I said, "Why? I didn't ask you to do that." And he said, "Because the schedule was stupid. It was all in sequence. It was all wrong." And I said, "The schedule was the way Joe and I want it to be. Put it back. That's the way we're going to shoot it." And I remember he said to me, I remember very clearly, I haven't seen him since the film was over. When I do see him, someday I'll run into him. And I plan to remind him of this, because he said, "If you shoot this film this way, you will fail," he said. Well, we didn't fail. We won out of 15 festivals. We 9 times won Best Picture or Best Western. We did not fail. But he just couldn't understand it because it wasn't efficient. you know?
And again, that was because of the luxury of funding it yourself.
Absolutely. Because it costs more to shoot it in sequence.
Yeah.
Definitely. And it costs more to have that time.
So I know that we're at 8:15. Would you like to open this up for any questions, or is Joe still there?
I don't know. She hasn't popped back in.
Well, she knows all this stuff anyway. So.
Yeah. And you know what, Joe is one of my favorite people in the world.
Me too. And I know Beverly feels the same way. I mean, if I ever make another movie, there's no way I'm making it without Joe Haskin on it.
Yeah,
it won't happen. She's the best.
I recommended Joe to you, Perry.
Yes, you did. That's absolutely right. You did.
Joe. So we're gonna have to get Joe on a webcast here because
you should.
Her career and everything she's done has just eclipsed, me at this point. But one of the first gigs that she worked on in film was a feature that I was producing. And she and Kevin both came on board as PAs, and I didn't know them. I literally just, said, okay, we'll come on board. We'll see what you can do. And they both were the most incredible resources. And what they added to that team was just phenomenal. The movie sucked, unfortunately, but the making of the movie was one of the funnest experience I've ever had. And I saw Joe and Kevin just flourish in that creative world.
Aren't they a beautiful couple too? What a love story they have.
So much. We ended up one of Kevin's very first short scripts. I helped co-produce, and Joe co-produced, and we actually made their first movie together at my parents' house. So we just kind of go way back, but that's one of the things that I think when you're in a community like this, the Northern California community, specifically here in Sacramento and the regions around us, we have such a spirit of, cross-supporting each other and helping to do things to help make your picture happen, and to find people like Joe Haskin, who, oh my God, again, started off walking, and now is running and just doing so well. So
but you're right. That's really important. SAC is a great place to shoot a film.
Yeah.
I mean, it's absolutely great. It's not that well known how great it is, but it is. It's if I ever made another movie, I would want to make, even if it didn't need to be in Sacramento, I would want it to be made there. I'd want Joe and Beverly to work on it, and you. I mean, but you said it was the film sucked. That it's not well known that most films are terrible. Films just, it's very hard to make a good film, really hard. And the reason, I think, is that there's so many different elements to film, and all it takes is one of those elements to fall apart, and the whole film comes down. In fact, I think that, I don't know if anybody's ever thought this before, but it seems to me that film is the compilation of all the arts that humans have ever evolved in one package. Writing, painting, photography is painting, right? Music, acting, everything that man has ever done artistically is in one composite in movies. And I think that's why we all love movies so much. And I also think that's why it's so hard to make a good movie, because all it takes is one of those elements to go bad. Well, Slaughterhouse-Five, for example, was with George Roy Hill. It's an interesting film, but it's an unsuccessful film. And he put his finger. He knew even while we were shooting it what the problem was. And the problem was, I hate to say this because it seems like I'm knocking somebody. I'm not knocking. Michael Sachs was the lead of that film. He's a wonderful actor, but he couldn't pull off that part quite. He was the center of that film, and it wasn't working. And George Roy Hill knew it. And nothing. It didn't matter what else you did around that. You can't overcome those problems when they're there. You just can't beat them.
Yeah, it's an alchemy. It has to be just perfect, and that's where,
Yeah.
you never know what kind of magic is going to hit, and how it's going to affect people at the right time in the right way.
And
You know,
nobody ever sets out to make a bad movie. I've worked in 100 movies, I think, something like that, and nobody ever sets out to make a bad movie or a B movie or that it looks that way from the outside, but it's not that way from the inside. And
Yeah.
on back in the days of film, I don't ever remember hearing anybody ever say anything but, "Oh, the dailies look great. We saw the dailies last night. This is going to be a great movie." And then you see the film and it's a piece of crap. And you think, what happened? What happened? Where'd this wonderful movie go?
Yeah, yeah. No, I think
And
we had a lot more.
post-production can kill it too. I'll tell you, as an
Oh,
actor, I thought I understood editing, but I did not. And it took Gillian Hutching, who was my editor on this film, to teach me what editing was. And I now believe that the most difficult part of making a movie, the most creative part of making a movie, and the most exciting part of making a movie is editing.
Yeah.
And it took me, God, a year and a half to cut this film with Gillian Hutching helping me along the way.
So
And
what did you learn in that, in being involved in that editing process and seeing what you were, the final product that you're creating? Did you learn any lessons that, I know that you're kind of set in, you're done and you're not going to do anything beyond this, but
yeah, that's true. I think
what did
I'm
you
wrapped.
learn in that process to?
Well, there's so much, but basically it has to do with the fact that it's so the options are endless. One way to describe what I learned was one day Gillian made a jump cut. We had a shot where Brian Kaplan, who's playing the young man in the film, he's looking at something, and when we shot it, he was looking at these things that Sam had posted notes all over the place to help him remember things.
All right.
I don't know if that's a very common thing that Alzheimer's people do, is they write notes to themselves hoping that'll help their memory. So Sam had done that, and Brian was looking at them, reading them, trying to understand, and he spent a long time very still looking at them. And of course, that's what he should do as an actor, stay there as long as he wanted. And I would control it in editing. And of course, I knew what my cutaway was going to be. I was going to have a cutaway, and I forgot to shoot it. So he had nowhere to go. We were stuck with this shot of Brian looking at something for too long. And I had no idea how to solve that problem. And Gillian made a jump cut where Brian's looking at them, and all of a sudden, he's 10 feet away, walking away. And I said, Gillian, you can't do that. That's a jump cut, and that'll throw the audience. And she said, Perry, it's a movie. We can do anything we want. And I remember my head just going, whoa. The thought of that was so terrifying and exciting at the same time. So what she was teaching me was, I thought editing was you take the pieces of the puzzle and you put them together and you make the picture of the puzzle, right? And you can't see the picture beforehand, so it's hard to do it. And you might have extra pieces even. That's complicated, but in the end, what do? You just take what's been done artistically on the set, all the creativity on the set, and you just line them up in the right order. And that's editing. No, not even close. To show you how difficult it is and how painful and how tough you have to be, I cut out of The Divide my favorite moment as an actor in the whole movie. It's not in the movie. The best
Killing
thing
your
I did in the whole...
babies. That's so hard. Killing your babies.
What'd you say?
Killing your children. That's what they say in editing.
Yes,
you got to be willing to kill your children. It's
absolutely
tough.
I remember another thing that Gillian said. I said when she made another cut one day, and she was cutting something out, and I said, "You can't lose that because we got to have that because the audience will be confused if you don't keep that." And she looked at me like she was looking at a little 8-year-old child, and she said, "Perry, sometimes it's better to confuse them than to bore them."
That's a good editor.
Yeah.
Oh, she's great.
Yeah.
She's brilliant. She edited the director's cut of Old Age. What is that called? Blade Runner. Blade Runner.
Oh,
Wow.
Blade Runner. That shows you how good she is.
wow. Yeah.
But honestly, The Divide shows you how good she is too. Because when Jana and I finished what we thought was possibly the final cut, the film was 2 hours and 20 minutes long, I think. And it was, and I remember we watched it, and I remember thinking, and I bet Jana did too, I thought, oh my God, all that work, and it's no good. It's no good. It's hopeless. And I didn't know what to do. And now the cut is an hour 43. That's a large part of what Gillian did. She cut ruthlessly. But you don't just go in there with a razor blade and start cutting. You have to know what to cut. Like that smash cut that she made. She has such an impeccable sense of the audience and timing and the story. She could tell exactly the moment when the audience watching Brian reading this stuff, right when they are just starting to think, yeah, okay, what's next? And then she'd cut them away so that nobody ever sees that jump cut. I've asked so many people, nobody's ever seen it.
Yeah.
And yet she jumps somebody 10 feet away. But she does it right when you want him to go 10 feet away. So you're so glad that you don't even notice that the jump cut was made. I mean,
Crazy.
wow. It's so exciting.
And Beverly, you were a filmmaker before you became a film commissioner, and this makes me curious. I know that you did documentary films. Did you do anything of a narrative nature at all?
I worked on, so I went to film school at UCLA, so we worked on each other's projects, and when we graduated, we help each other on different projects. So I worked on commercials. Alexander Payne, the director, was at school when I was. I think I was in his student film. I can't remember. Or no, one of our mutual friends, her film, we were in it together. I was married to a screenwriter for many years, so I've tried my hand at screenwriting, and I appreciate everybody else's completed scripts. Thank you very much. Read a lot of screenplays, but my primary thing was documentaries. But talking about editing, documentaries are basically made in the editing room.
Yeah, you don't know what you're getting.
Yeah, because one I did was on a woman who did humpback whale science or studies in Hawaii. And when you're working with wild animals, you don't know, especially whales, you don't know when you're going to see them because they're underwater. And the couple that we were focusing on could film underwater, but we were shooting a lot of things at the surface because we couldn't get a permission from the National Marine Fisheries, which is why we used the whale scientists footage. But I remember when I was screening, this was my thesis film at UCLA, and I was screening it for the school, for the teachers. And we had this one sequence where a whale just kept coming out breaching one time after another. We're sitting there in the Zodiac, and it was like 5 or 6 times. It just came out and went down, came out and went down. And I remember one of my teachers saying, well, why were you on that side of the whale? The light would have been so much better. And this was one of my teachers. And I'm just like, oh my God. Anyway, it was a fabulous shot, and it was one of my favorite shots, and it did stay in my documentary. But it's, you get timing out of it. I mean, you were talking about how Gillian, whatever.
Gillian, yeah.
She knew just when the audience might be getting bored with holding on that sequence and just moving on to something else. And giving your audience credit for being intelligent, that's worth knowing. Definitely. Yeah. Thanks for asking. Maybe I'll go back and make productions.
Maybe you will. Wow, what a wonderful thing that would be. Why not?
When you have that creative spark to go to film school, you have an intent to create. You have a need to create. So I would not be surprised, because now you don't have any of the restrictions or limitations of your own imagination.
Actually, professional film commissioners, if they belong to the international organization or our state professional association, you are not supposed to work in the industry or profit from the industry. It's an ethic that you basically sign off on when you become a professional film commissioner, because it's a conflict of interest. So, so at any rate, that's one of the reasons why you don't see film commissioners who, I mean, some of the film commissioners in California have production backgrounds, but they don't work in the business because it's an ethical issue.
Ever, even upon retirement?
Well,
yeah, exactly.
That's different. But like, so for instance, if I was going to put if I wanted to do a documentary and hire crew people, well, these could be people who might be coming to me in my government position as a film commissioner.
Yeah, no, I get that.
You don't want to mix those things up. So you really have to put that on hold. And but at any rate, thank you for asking.
But Beverly, I think that's an incredible idea. Let me help you find a way to go back to making film.
Do you still have that ranch, Perry?
Yep, I do.
Yes.
You're thinking.
Let's do a documentary about cows.
Yes, that famous dead cow.
Yeah, right.
Oh my God. You know what? It's so fascinating talking to you guys. And I've already said this to you both, but I'll say it to you guys. Perry is a wealth of knowledge, and he's got a history and resume that really we can go into so many different directions with what he can share and what you will benefit from learning. So we're definitely going to be tapping Perry to come back and do some other things with the webcast. We are going to stay in touch with Beverly and see what we can do to support her filmmaking adventure.
Yes, I think that's wonderful. And me too. I want to help Beverly make film again.
Yeah. But I want to let you guys go. We've gone long, but I'm so happy to do that because the information, again, is just, it's so great. And we're so proud of what you did with your film, Perry. You know, I don't think until we knew that you were somebody within our own backyard did we, realize the breadth of where you'd been and what you'd done and what you're still continuing to do. So we want to support anything that we can. The CFAA is here for the both of you. We could not appreciate having you and your time more. And, I think everybody that's watching, if you've enjoyed that, share it. We'll put a link out on the Facebook page where people, and for our YouTube channel too. And then, just share it and let people know this is what's happening in Sacramento. These are some of the incredible people that are making up our film region. And we are growing this thing, and we are all putting in the effort to make it something that we're going to be really proud of. So, Beverly, you've been such a big part of that. I don't want to say a whole lot because I swear to God, I'll start crying because I can't even imagine you not being there.
Cry either. So
I thank you so much. We have next week on the 17th, our Adobe creative team that will be able to show some incredible tools that they're putting out, that they're using. And, any questions, you guys are welcome to comment, and we'll make sure that it gets back to Perry and Beverly. But for now, we're going to say goodnight and thank you both so much.
Thanks,
I love being part of
Beverly.
the community.
Bye, Perry. Bye, Lori. Thank you so much.
Bye.